Everything is wrong.
Even the ocean looks different.
Close your eyes for 1 second. Now, open them. That's how fast it happened. December 5th, 1945. 5 bombers, 14 men, 1 radio call. We can't find West. And then, nothing. No wreckage, no bodies, no answer. Not then, not ever. Subscribe, because you need to hear this one. 1. A Tuesday afternoon, nothing special. Picture it with me for a moment. Fort Lauderdale, Florida. December 5th, 1945. The war has been over for 3 months. Sailors are coming home. Life is, for the first time in years, supposed to be ordinary again. At the Naval Air Station, 5 Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bombers sit fueled and ready on the tarmac. This isn't a combat mission, it's homework. The Navy calls it Navigation Problem Number 1. A routine training flight, the kind flown 100 times before. Bomb a target, fly a triangle over open water. Come home for dinner. 14 men climb aboard. Some are seasoned. Leading the flight is Lieutenant Charles Taylor, a man with 2,500 hours in the air and real combat experience in the Pacific. Others are barely out of flight school, logging their first hours over open ocean. It's an unremarkable Tuesday. Nobody writes home about a training flight. You already know it won't stay that way. It was never just a training exercise. It was the last ordinary afternoon 14 families would ever have. 2. The voice that said, "I don't know." At 2:10 p.m., Flight 19 lifts off. Bombing run, routine. Turn north, routine. And then, somewhere around 3:40, something shifts. Quietly, almost politely, the way disasters often begin. Taylor's compass, he says, isn't working. Both compasses, actually. He believes he's over the Florida Keys. He is not. He is far to the northeast, over the Bahamas, and every course correction he makes from that point on drags his squadron farther from land, not closer to it. Listen to what the men actually said, because it's still on record. One of Taylor's own pilots radios another flight leader. "If we would just fly west, we would get home." Think about that sentence. A trained aviator, watching his commanding officer make what he believes is the wrong call, and powerless to override him. Military discipline held. The formation kept flying, away from safety, together. By 6:20 p.m., the sun is nearly gone and the fuel gauges are dropping toward empty. Taylor's final confirmed transmission is calm, almost procedural, and that's what makes it unbearable. All planes close up tight. We'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together. They went down together. Somewhere over hundreds of miles of dark Atlantic water, 5 aircraft and 14 men simply stopped transmitting. It was never just a wrong compass reading. It was a chain of small, human, forgivable decisions that no one could stop once it started. 3, and then the rescue plane vanished too. Here's where the story stops behaving the way disasters are supposed to behave. At 7:27 p.m., a Navy PBM Mariner, a massive flying boat, 13 men aboard, call sign Training 49, takes off from Banana River to search for Flight 19. It checks in once, right on schedule, businesslike and calm. It is never heard from again. 48 minutes later, the tanker ship SS Gaines Mills radios in something almost too strange to say out loud. Flames, 100 feet high, burning on the horizon for 10 minutes straight, at almost the exact position the Mariner should have been. A nearby warship reports losing radar contact with an aircraft in that same spot. At that same moment, 19 men. Gone in under a minute. On the same night, in the same stretch of ocean, while searching for 5 other men who had already vanished. Now you have 19 people looking for 14 people, and both groups disappear. It was never just a missing patrol anymore. It was 2 disasters, stacked on top of each other, in the same patch of sky, on the same impossible night. 4. The search that swallowed its own answer. What happened next was, at the time, one of the largest search operations in American peacetime history. Hundreds of aircraft, dozens of ships, days of searching, hundreds of thousands of square miles of open ocean combed from the air and the sea. They found nothing. Not a life raft, not an oil slick, not one piece of aluminum. 6 aircraft, 5 bombers and a flying boat, and 19 plus 14 men, 33 people in total, erased from the map without a trace. The Navy's official board of inquiry did what boards of inquiry do. They built a conclusion. Taylor, they said, had mistaken the Bahamas for the Florida Keys, made the wrong calls, and led his men out to sea until the fuel ran out. Simple, tragic, explainable. Then, Taylor's mother did something you don't expect from a grieving parent facing the United States Navy. She fought back. She argued, publicly, that you cannot blame a dead man for losing 5 aircraft when you have never found a single bolt of physical evidence to prove what actually happened. And the Navy, remarkably, listened. The official cause was quietly changed. Not pilot error, just 3 words. Cause unknown. Say that out loud, cause unknown. The United States Navy, after the largest search in its peacetime history, officially does not know what happened to Flight 19. That admission is rarer than you think, and it's exactly the kind of silence that turns a tragedy into a legend. It was never just an accident report. It was an official government document admitting defeat and leaving a blank space just large enough for every theory that came after to fill. 5. The theories that filled the silence. Silence, it turns out, is unbearable to the human mind. We fill it. And for Flight 19, the theories arrived almost immediately and never really stopped. The dry, technical explanation is the one most historians accept. Taylor's compass failed. His experience in the Pacific led him to misjudge unfamiliar Atlantic geography, and the squadron flew east into open water until it had nowhere left to go. Fuel exhaustion, ditching at sea, currents and depth doing the rest. But that explanation has a hole in it exactly the size of the missing wreckage. 33 men, 6 aircraft, decades of searching, and in 1991, a salvage team actually announced they'd found 5 Avengers on the ocean floor in roughly the right area. Headline news for about a day, until the tail numbers came back and proved they belonged to 5 entirely different aircraft that had crashed on 5 entirely different missions. Not Flight 19, another false hope, another dead end. That's the pattern with this case. Every decade, someone finds something. Every decade, it turns out to be something else. And into that vacuum walked a phrase that didn't even exist yet in 1945. The Bermuda Triangle. A journalist named Vincent Gaddis coined it nearly 20 years later, in 1964, using Flight 19 as his opening exhibit. A decade after that, author Charles Berlitz turned the idea into a worldwide bestseller, and Flight 19 sat right at the center of it, the founding case. The story that made an ordinary stretch of ocean feel haunted to millions of readers who had never even heard of Fort Lauderdale. You've probably seen the reenactment without even knowing it. In Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the 5 Avengers reappeared decades later, spotless, untouched by time, deposited gently in the Arizona desert by a UFO that had apparently been keeping them safe the whole time. Fiction, obviously. But ask yourself why that scene feels so deeply satisfying to watch. It's because the real ending never came. Hollywood gave Flight 19 the resolution the United States Navy never could: a place for those 14 men to land, even if only on a movie screen. It was never just a training accident that went wrong. It was a mystery so complete, so total, that popular culture eventually had to invent its own ending, because reality refused to provide one. 6. What's still down there? Here's the part that should keep you up tonight. Somewhere in the Atlantic, in water that stretches thousands of feet deep in places, there are still 6 American military aircraft that have never been located with certainty. Not 1, not 5. 6, 5 Avengers and a Mariner, carrying the remains of 33 servicemen who never came home from what should have been a routine Tuesday. Modern sonar technology has mapped ocean floors that 1945-era searchers could never have dreamed of reaching. Deep-sea wreck hunters have found Titanic. They have found aircraft lost for a century in far worse conditions. And still, Flight 19 and its rescue plane have never been conclusively recovered. Every few years, someone announces a new expedition. Every few years, sonar picks up an anomaly that looks almost right. And every few years, it turns out to be something else. A different wreck, a rock formation, a shipping container that fell off a cargo ship decades later. Feel that pattern for a moment. Hope, then correction. Hope, then correction. 80 years of it, on a loop, and still no final answer. Somewhere down there, 33 men are still, technically, still out there. Not resolved, not recovered, not explained. Just missing, the way they were the moment the last radio transmission went quiet. Frozen in whatever position the ocean currents left them in, decade after decade, while the surface world built television specials and blockbuster movies and entire tourism industries out of the empty space where their answer should be. It was never just an unsolved case file gathering dust in a Navy archive. It's an open search that has now outlived every single person who was flying that day, and every person who ever went looking for them. 7. The families who never got a funeral. Think about what it means to lose someone with no body to bury, no wreckage to point to, no definitive moment where the Navy can say, with certainty, here is what happened to your son, your husband, your brother. 33 families lived with that particular kind of grief. Not the grief of a funeral, where there's a casket and a folded flag, and a place to stand once a year and grieve properly. This was the other kind, the grief of an open file, a grief with no edges. For years, some of those families held out a private, quiet hope that maybe, somehow, someone had survived, been picked up by a passing ship, was living somewhere with amnesia, waiting to be found. That hope is its own kind of cruelty. It doesn't heal, it just waits. Charles Taylor's mother lived the rest of her life fighting a label, pilot error, attached to a son whose body was never recovered, whose aircraft was never found, whose final words were calm and responsible right up until the radio went silent. She never got to bury him. She spent her remaining years making sure the U.S. Navy couldn't bury his reputation either. And she won. Cause unknown is, in its own way, a mother's victory, wrung out of the U.S. government 30 years after the fact. You have to sit with that for a second. An official government document changed decades later because one grieving parent refused to accept an answer built on missing evidence. It was never just a military statistic. 5 aircraft, 14 crew, 1 rescue plane, 19 more. It was 33 sets of parents, wives, and children who spent the rest of their lives waiting for a phone call that never came. Picture it one more time, all the way through. A Tuesday afternoon with nothing special about it. A compass that failed at the worst possible moment. A voice on the radio, calm and procedural, saying we'll go down together as if he were reading a checklist instead of writing the last words 14 families would ever hear. A rescue plane that vanished, chasing the very men it was sent to save. A fireball on the horizon that 19 more families had to somehow explain to their children. An official United States Navy report that ends not with an answer, but with the words, "cause unknown." And now, 80 years later, 6 aircraft still missing, somewhere under an ocean that has never once given them back. Flight 19 was never just the case that named the Bermuda Triangle. It was 33 men who took off on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, expecting to be home in time for dinner, and instead became one of the longest-running mysteries the United States military has ever officially admitted, in writing, that it cannot solve. Somewhere in that ocean tonight, 6 aircraft are still waiting to be found. Tell me in the comments, do you believe it was simple human error compounded by terrible luck twice in one night? Or is there something about that particular stretch of ocean that we still don't understand? Subscribe, because next time we go looking for another plane that vanished. And this time, decades later, someone actually found it. You will not believe what it was still carrying, or what one word its crew radioed in the last seconds before it went silent forever.